Now, I don't usually make marriage proposals to customers, especially not while I'm covered in sawdust and holding a power drill. That sounds like an angry hornet. But that Tuesday afternoon was different. That Tuesday afternoon, I met Samantha. And what started as a simple home repair job turned into the most confusing, terrifying, and wonderful mistake of my life. Because sometimes the best things happen when you say exactly the wrong thing to exactly the right person. My name's Eddie Rodriguez. I'm 32 years old, and I run a small handyman business here in suburban Phoenix, Arizona. Not exactly the career my parents imagined when they invested in my engineering degree. But life has a funny way of taking detours. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. After 3 years in a corporate cubicle, staring at blueprints for office buildings I'd never see completed, I decided I'd rather fix things I could actually touch. So I bought a used pickup truck, filled it with tools, and started Eddie's Fix-It Solutions. Catchy name, right? My business partner. And by business partner, I mean my younger brother Justin, who shows up when he feels like it, keeps telling me I should rebrand. But honestly, when you're good at fixing broken garbage disposals and squeaky hinges, marketing genius isn't really required. The thing about being a handyman in Phoenix is that you learn to start early. By July, the Arizona sun turns everything into a furnace, including my truck, my tools, and unfortunately, me. That's why I was pulling into the driveway of 2847 Maple Ridge Drive at exactly 1:30 p.m. on a Tuesday in late September, when the temperature had finally dropped below the surface of Mercury. The house was one of those southwestern Adobe-style homes that looked like they were designed by someone who watched too many cowboy movies. Terracotta roof tiles, desert landscaping, with more cacti than a nature documentary, and a front porch that wrapped around the side like it was trying to hug the building. It was the kind of place that screamed I have my life together in a way that made my apartment complex feel like a cardboard box. I grabbed my toolbox from the truck bed, checked the work order on my phone one more time, kitchen cabinet, door repair, possibly broken hinge, and walked up the flagstone path. The doorbell played some elaborate melody that sounded like it belonged in a Spanish villa, which seemed about right for this neighborhood. When the door opened, I swear the desert breeze stopped blowing out of respect. She had shoulder length, chestnut brown hair that caught the afternoon light like she'd planned it, warm hazel eyes behind stylish glasses, and this effortless confidence that hit you like walking into perfectly air-conditioned room after being outside all day. She wore a flowing white blouse and dark jeans, the kind of casual outfit that somehow looked more put together than my best clothes. But it wasn't just how she looked, it was how she carried herself, like she knew something about the world that the rest of us were still figuring out. "You must be Eddie from the Fix-It Company," she said. And her voice had this slight rasp to it, like she'd just finished laughing at something genuinely funny. "That's me," I said, wiping my palm on my jeans before extending it for a handshake. "And you're Mrs. Patterson." "Just Samantha," she said, taking my hand with a firm grip that somehow managed to be both professional and warm. "I appreciate you coming out on such short notice. I know cabinet repair isn't exactly emergency territory, but I'm hosting a dinner party this weekend, and that door has been driving me crazy for months." She led me through a living room that looked like it belonged in one of those home design magazines. My sister Crystal always leaves lying around. Everything was coordinated but not matchy. Comfortable but clearly expensive. Lived in but immaculate. The kitchen was even more impressive. Granite countertops, stainless steel appliances, and a center island big enough to land a small aircraft. "There's the culprit," she said, pointing to an upper cabinet door that was hanging at a slightly dejected angle. "It used to close properly, but now it just sort of gives up halfway." I set my toolbox on the counter and took a closer look. The hinge was definitely loose, probably just needed tightening, maybe a replacement screw or two. "A 15-minute job, tops, should be an easy fix," I said, pulling out my drill. "Loose hinge screws. Happens all the time with cabinet doors. That get used a lot. That's a relief." I was worried I'd have to replace the whole cabinet system. She leaned against the island, watching me work with what seemed like genuine interest rather than the usual polite customer surveillance. "Can I get you something to drink? Water? Coffee? I just made a fresh pot." "Coffee sounds great, thanks." As I worked, we talked. Easy conversation. The kind that flows naturally without those awkward pauses, where you're both desperately searching for the next topic. She told me about her dinner party, a book club gathering where they apparently spent more time drinking wine and gossiping than actually discussing literature. I told her about my morning job, replacing a bathroom faucet for an elderly couple who insisted on supervising every step while their 3 cats provided additional commentary. You know, she said, handing me a mug of coffee that smelled like it cost more per pound than I made in a day. It's refreshing to meet someone who actually enjoys their work. Most people I know spend their days counting down to 5 o'clock. I used to be one of those people, I admitted, testing the cabinet door. Perfect. Turns out there's something satisfying about fixing things that are actually broken instead of just optimizing corporate synergies. I made air quotes around the last part, which made her laugh. That laugh. It was the kind of laugh that starts in your chest and works its way out. Completely genuine and slightly contagious. The kind of laugh that makes you want to say funnier things just to hear it again. Well, I said, closing my toolbox and taking a final sip of coffee, you're all set. That door should give you at least another few years of reliable service. Perfect timing for the weekend. She walked me toward the front door. What do I owe you? Just the service call minimum, $45, as she handed me the cash. Our fingers brushed for just a moment, and I felt that little electric jolt that usually only happens in movies. And that's when, without thinking, without any plan or strategy, I opened my mouth and let the words tumble out. You know what? If you were 38, I'd probably ask you to marry me right now. The silence that followed could have powered the entire neighborhood. Samantha stopped mid-step, turned around slowly, and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. It was somewhere between amusement and curiosity, with maybe a hint of that look you give someone who just announced they believe in Bigfoot. 38, she repeated, tilting her head slightly. That's oddly specific. My face felt like I'd been standing too close to a furnace. I don't know why I said that. Sometimes my mouth operates independently of my brain, usually at the worst possible moments. She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, but there was a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. So what you're saying is, if I were exactly 38 years old, you'd propose marriage to a woman you've known for approximately 27 minutes. When you put it like that, it sounds even worse. Oh, it definitely sounds worse. Her smile grew wider, but also kind of charming in a completely inappropriate, mildly concerning way. I ran a hand through my hair, probably making it stick up at weird angles. Look, I'm not usually this, whatever this is. I swear I'm normally a functioning adult who doesn't propose to customers. I'm relieved to hear that. For a moment I thought this was part of your standard service package. She paused, studying my face like she was trying to solve a puzzle. Can I ask what made you pick 38 specifically? The honest answer was that 38 seemed like a reasonable age for someone who had their life together, own a house like this, and made coffee that probably cost more than my lunch. Someone who seemed simultaneously approachable and intimidatingly sophisticated, but saying that out loud felt like it would only make things worse. I guess 38 seems like the perfect age for someone who knows who they are, but isn't tired of surprises yet. She raised an eyebrow. That's actually not a terrible answer. Thanks, I think, Eddie, she said. And the way she said my name made something flutter in my chest. I'm 51. Does that scare you? Time stopped. Not in the romantic movie way where everything goes into slow motion while orchestral music swells. More like the way time stops when you're falling off a ladder, and your brain is trying to calculate exactly how much this is going to hurt. 50-1. I had been flirting with, albeit accidentally and inappropriately, a woman who was nearly 20 years older than me. A woman who was probably thinking about retirement planning while I was still paying off student loans. A woman who had lived an entire adult life before I'd even graduated high school. Scare me? I repeated, buying time while my brain rebooted. Why would that scare me? Oh, I don't know, she said, her voice carrying just a hint of challenge. Maybe because I'm old enough to be your... She paused, calculating. Well, not your mother unless I'd had a very surprising teenage pregnancy. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. But definitely you're much older. Sister who made questionable life choices. I laughed, which surprised both of us. 51 isn't old. My neighbor Mrs. Hartley is 51, and she just ran a marathon last month. Granted, she also yells at kids for walking too close to her petunias, but still, your neighbor sounds delightful. She is, actually. Makes incredible banana bread and gives unsolicited dating advice that's usually terrible, but always well-intentioned. I shifted my toolbox to my other hand. Besides, age is just numbers, right? Spoken like someone who's 32. Okay, fair point, but I meant what I said. Well, not the marriage part. That was my mouth being stupid, but the rest of it. You seem like someone worth getting to know, regardless of what year you were born. Something shifted in her expression. The playful challenge softened into something warmer, more genuine. You know, most men your age would have already invented an emergency phone call to escape this conversation. Most men my age probably have better sense than to propose marriage to strangers in the first place. True. She glanced at her watch, then back at me. I should let you get to your next appointment. Actually, I said, surprising myself again. You're my last call of the day. My next appointment is with my couch and whatever's left in my fridge. Sounds riveting. It really is. Last night's leftover Chinese food and a documentary about penguins. Living the dream. She laughed again, and I was starting to think I might become addicted to that sound. Well, my evening plans involve finishing a bottle of wine I opened last weekend and pretending I'm going to read the book my book club is supposed to discuss Thursday. What book? The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. It's actually good, but I keep getting distracted by real life. Real life has a way of doing that. We stood there for a moment, neither of us quite ready to end the conversation, but both aware that I was technically done with the job and should probably leave. The afternoon sun was starting to shift, casting longer shadows across her front porch. Eddie, she said finally, this might be the wine talking, and I haven't even opened it yet, but would you like to stay for dinner? Nothing fancy, just whatever I can throw together. Consider it payment for not running away screaming when I told you my age. Every rational part of my brain started listing reasons why this was a bad idea. She was a customer. She was 19 years older than me. I was covered in sawdust and probably smelled like WD-40. I didn't know anything about her except that she made excellent coffee and had impeccable taste in kitchen appliances. I'd like that, I heard myself saying. But I should probably warn you. I'm not great at book club discussions. My literary analysis usually begins and ends with I liked it or it was okay. Perfect. I was getting tired of people who analyze the symbolic meaning of every semicolon. She stepped aside to let me back into the house. Fair warning though. I'm what my friends charitably call an experimental cook. Tonight's experiment involves chicken, whatever vegetables didn't die in my crisper drawer, and a sauce I'm making up as I go. Sounds better than leftover kung pao. That's setting the bar pretty low. As I followed her back into the kitchen, setting my toolbox by the door, I caught myself grinning like an idiot. Maybe it was the Arizona heat affecting my judgment, or maybe it was the way she moved through her kitchen like she owned the world, or maybe it was just the simple fact that for the first time in months, I was genuinely excited about what the rest of the day might bring. Whatever it was. 51 didn't scare me at all. If anything, it made her more intriguing. Can I at least wash my hands first? I asked, gesturing to the sawdust coating my palms. I'm pretty sure health codes frown on construction debris and dinner preparation. Bathrooms down the hall, first door on the right. Towels are in the cabinet if you want to clean up properly. The bathroom was another testament to her impeccable taste: subway tiles, brass fixtures, and hand soap that smelled like it came from one of those fancy stores, where everything costs 3 times what it should. I splashed water on my face and tried to make my hair look less like I'd been electrocuted. In the mirror, I looked like exactly what I was, a 32-year-old handyman who had no business having dinner with a woman like Samantha Patterson. But here I was anyway. When I returned to the kitchen, she had tied her hair back and was pulling ingredients from the refrigerator with the focused intensity of a general planning a battle. Chicken breast, bell peppers, onions, and what looked like half a farmer's market worth of vegetables. So, I said, leaning against the counter, experimental cooking. Should I be worried about food poisoning? Or is this more of a might accidentally create something delicious situation? Little bit of both, she admitted, unwrapping the chicken. I used to be a terrible cook. Burn water, overcooked pasta, the whole disaster package. But then I got divorced 5 years ago and realized I had 2 choices: learn to cook or live on takeout forever. Divorce, I repeated carefully. That must have been tough. It was. She began slicing the chicken with quick, confident strokes. 23 years of marriage. And it turns out we'd been growing into completely different people for the last 10. Richard wanted everything to stay exactly the same forever. I wanted, well, pretty much everything except that. There was something in her voice, not bitterness, exactly, but a kind of hard-won acceptance that comes from surviving something that nearly broke you. I'm sorry, I said. That sounds incredibly difficult. It was. But also liberating. if that makes sense. Turns out I actually like my own company. I like choosing my own dinner plans and not having to negotiate over every decision. She paused in her chopping. I like being able to invite strange handymen to dinner without having to explain myself to anyone. Am I strange? Jury's still out. She smiled. But you did propose marriage to someone you'd known for half an hour. So the evidence isn't looking good for your sanity. Fair point, in my defense. I blame temporary insanity brought on by really good coffee, and I gestured vaguely at her. And what? You. Just you. The way you laugh. The way you talk about things like they matter. Most people I meet these days are either complaining about their jobs or scrolling through their phones. You actually seem present, like you're living your life instead of just enduring it. She stopped chopping entirely and looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. Eddie, how old do you think I looked when you first saw me? The question caught me off guard. I don't know. I wasn't really thinking about age. You just seemed. I guess I thought maybe late 30s, early 40s. But honestly, I was more focused on the fact that you were beautiful and funny and seemed to actually enjoy talking to me. Late 30s, she repeated thoughtfully. That's very kind of you. But I know exactly what 51 looks like in the mirror every morning. Gray roots that need touching up, laugh lines that no amount of moisturizer is going to erase, and a metabolism that gave up somewhere around my 45th birthday. You know what I see, I said, surprising myself with how serious my voice sounded. I see someone who's comfortable in her own skin. Someone who's been through enough to know what matters and what doesn't. Someone who's not trying to be anyone except exactly who she is. She was quiet for a long moment, then resumed chopping with deliberate focus. You know, when Richard left, he told me I should try to find someone age-appropriate when I was ready to date again. Said it would be easier for everyone involved. Sounds like Richard was kind of an ass. He wasn't wrong, though. Dating at 51 is complicated. Most men my age are either looking for women in their 30s or they're so bitter about their own divorces that every conversation turns into a therapy session. And younger men, she shrugged. Well, let's just say most of them aren't interested in anything long-term with someone. Who remembers the 80s firsthand? Their loss, is it, though, really? She turned to face me fully. Eddie, I'm 51 years old. I have a teenage daughter who lives with her father and thinks I'm going through a midlife crisis. I have a mortgage, a retirement account that's not nearly as healthy as it should be, and a book club full of women who will definitely have opinions about me having dinner with someone young enough to be, well, someone significantly younger than me. Are you trying to talk me out of this? I'm trying to be realistic. Because in about 6 months, when the novelty wears off and you realize you're dating someone who needs reading glasses to see the menu and falls asleep during late movies, you're going to start looking around for someone who can keep up with your energy level. I moved closer, close enough to catch the scent of her perfume mixing with the smell of cooking onions. Samantha, can I tell you something? What? I've dated plenty of women my own age. Hell, I've dated women younger than me. And you know what? Half of them were so busy trying to figure out who they wanted to be that they didn't have time to actually be present for anyone else. They were all potential and no substance, all questions and no answers. I paused, trying to find the right words. You've already figured out who you are. You've survived a marriage and a divorce, raised a kid, built a life. You cook experimental dinners and host book clubs and fix broken cabinet doors yourself when you need to. You're not potential anymore. You're actual. And I struggled for a moment. That's incredibly attractive. She studied my face like she was looking for signs that I was lying or just trying to be nice. Whatever she saw there seemed to satisfy her, because some of the tension went out of her shoulders. Well, she said finally, when you put it like that, it almost sounds like being 51 is an advantage. It is, trust me. We'll see. She turned back to the stove, but I caught the small smile she was trying to hide. Now, are you going to help me cook this dinner? Or are you just going to stand there making speeches about the virtues of middle-aged women? What do you need me to do? Can you chop vegetables without losing any fingers? I'm a handyman. If I couldn't handle sharp objects, I'd have been out of business years ago. She handed me a knife and pointed to the pile of bell peppers. Prove it. As we worked side by side in her kitchen, something settled between us. Not the electric tension from earlier, but something warmer and more sustainable, the kind of comfortable rhythm that usually takes weeks to develop, not hours. So, she said as she seasoned the chicken, tell me about your family. Are your parents going to have opinions about you dating someone their age? My parents live in Tucson and mostly concern them. Selves with their golf game, and they're to grandchildren. From my sister Crystal. As long as I'm happy and not asking them for money. They're pretty hands-off about my dating life. And your brother, Justin. Justin thinks anyone who voluntarily spends time with me must have excellent judgment. Regardless of age, he'll probably want to high-five you. She laughed. I like him already. What about your daughter, the one who thinks you're having a midlife crisis, Avery? Samantha's expression grew more complex. She's 17. Lives with her father during the week and spends weekends with me. She's brilliant and stubborn and absolutely convinced that anyone over 40 should resign themselves to a life of quiet dignity and sensible shoes. Sounds like she's going to love me. Oh, she's going to have thoughts. Many, many thoughts. The chicken was sizzling in the pan now, filling the kitchen with the kind of smell that made you forget you'd ever eaten anywhere else. I watched Samantha move around her kitchen with practiced efficiency, and it struck me how natural this felt. Standing here, chopping vegetables, talking about families and complications like we'd been doing it for years instead of ours. When do I get to meet this opinionated teenager? I asked, adding the peppers to a growing pile of colorfully diced vegetables. Well, she'll be here this weekend for our usual Saturday morning breakfast tradition. So, pretty soon, actually, Samantha glanced at me while flipping the chicken. Unless you come to your senses between now and then and decide this whole thing is too complicated. Is that what you're hoping for? She paused, spatula in midair. Honestly, I'm terrified you will, and I'm terrified you won't. That's quite a range of terror. It's been a confusing day. She turned to face me fully. Eddie, can I ask you something? And will you promise to give me a real answer? Not the polite answer or the answer you think I want to hear. Shoot, what do you actually want here? Because I've been married, I've been divorced, I've been alone, and I've figured out how to be okay with all of those things. I don't need rescuing, and I don't need someone to complete me or whatever the dating apps tell people they're supposed to be looking for. She gestured with the spatula for emphasis. So what is it about this situation that makes you want to stick around for the complicated parts? It was a fair question, and she deserved a real answer. I set down the knife and leaned against the counter, thinking. You know how most conversations feel like you're both just waiting for your turn to talk? Like you're having to separate monologues that occasionally overlap, she nodded. This doesn't feel like that. When you talk, I actually want to hear what you're going to say next. When you laugh, I want to figure out how to make it happen again. And when you told me you were 51, my first thought wasn't about what that meant for me. It was curiosity about what that meant for you. What those 51 years taught you. What they took away. What they gave you. I paused, trying to find the right words. I guess what I want is to understand you. Not fix you or change you or turn you into some fantasy version of what I think I need. Just know you. See what happens when two people actually pay attention to each other. Samantha was quiet for a long moment, stirring the vegetables with unnecessary focus. That's a good answer. But understanding someone and building something real with them are two different things. Understanding is the easy part. It's everything else that gets complicated, such as, she turned off the burner and faced me, such as the fact that we're in completely different phases of our lives. You're still figuring out who you want to be. I'm trying to figure out who I want to be next. You probably want kids someday. I raised one and barely survived the experience. You have energy and optimism and this whole future spread out in front of you. I have experience and caution and a very clear sense of how quickly things can fall apart. Those sound like they could be complementary rather than contradictory. Could be. Or they could be completely incompatible. She pulled plates from the cabinet. Eddie, I like you. More than I should, probably. But I've been through enough to know that liking someone isn't enough if the fundamentals don't line up. What fundamentals? Life goals. Timeline. What you want your next 10 years to look like. She began plating the food with the kind of precision that suggested this conversation was making her nervous. I mean, do you even know what you want your next 10 years to look like? That hit closer to home than I wanted to admit. Not exactly, no. But isn't that kind of the point? Figuring it out as you go. See, that's the difference between 32 and 51. At 51, you don't have the luxury of figuring it out as you go. You start thinking about things like whether you want to spend your retirement traveling or staying close to grandchildren you might want to have someday. You think about health insurance and for 101 kiloseconds and whether your knees are going to hold up for hiking trips in your 60s. She handed me a plate that looked like it belonged in a food magazine. At 32, Those things probably feel like abstract future problems. At 51, they're next week. I took a bite of the chicken. It was incredible, perfectly seasoned. The vegetables still had just the right amount of crunch. And the sauce she'd improvised was better than anything I'd had at restaurants. This is amazing, I said. Don't change the subject. I'm not. I'm just saying, if you can create something this good by experimenting and making it up as you go, maybe there's something to be said for not having everything planned out in advance. She smiled despite herself. That's a terrible metaphor, but an accurate one. Look, Samantha, I can't promise you I have the next 10 years figured out. I can't even promise you I have the next 10 months figured out. But I can promise you that whatever I figure out, I'd rather figure it out with you than without you, Eddie. And I know that's not enough. I know you need more certainty than that. But what if instead of trying to solve all the potential problems right now, we just see what happens? Take it one day at a time and be honest with each other about what we're thinking and feeling. One day at a time. One day at a time, starting with today. Today I met someone who made me laugh and think and feel more present than I have in months. Today I had the best conversation I've had in years with someone who challenges me and doesn't treat me like I'm either a project to be fixed or an accessory to make her life more interesting. I set down my fork. Today, for the first time in a very long time, I met someone I actually want to get to know better. Not because she fits some idea I had about what I was looking for, but because she's interesting and complicated and real, in a way that makes everything else feel a little more real too. Samantha was quiet, considering. And tomorrow we figure out tomorrow. And when Avery meets you and asks pointed questions about your intentions with her mother, tomorrow, we figure out how to answer pointed questions from teenagers. And when your friends start making jokes about cougars and midlife crises, tomorrow we figure out how to handle friends with poor senses of humor. And when we run into problems we can't solve by taking them one day at a time, then we'll deal with those problems when we get to them, together, if you want, separately if that works better. I reached across the table and touched her hand gently. But I'd rather try and fail than not try at all. Wouldn't you? She looked down at our hands, then back up at my face. You know, when Richard left, he told me I should learn to be more realistic about my expectations. Stop wanting things that were too complicated or unlikely to work out. What did you tell him? I told him that realistic expectations were what got us a marriage. That felt more like a business partnership than a love story. She turned her hand over so our palms were touching. Maybe I'm tired of being realistic. Maybe realistic is overrated. Maybe. She squeezed my hand. Okay, Eddie Rodriguez. One day at a time, but I have conditions. Name them. First, we're honest with each other. If this starts feeling like a mistake for either of us, we say so. No pretending everything's fine when it's not. Agreed. Second, we don't make any big declarations or life-changing decisions until we've known each other longer than one evening. No matter how good the conversation is, even though I already proposed. Especially because you already proposed. She grinned. And third, you have to understand that meeting Avery is going to be an experience. She's protective and suspicious, and has no filter when it comes to expressing her opinions about my choices. Sounds like she gets that from her mother. I prefer to think of it as healthy skepticism. Samantha pulled her hand back and picked up her fork. So, one day at a time. Starting with finishing this dinner and seeing if we can make it through an entire meal without one of us panicking about age gaps and life phases. I think we can manage that. We'll see. The night's still young. As we ate, the conversation shifted to lighter topics, favorite movies, worst jobs we'd ever had, the peculiar challenges of living in Phoenix during the summer. But underneath the easy chat, I could feel something settling between us. Not the frantic energy of earlier, but something steadier. The beginning of trust, maybe. Or at least the beginning of possibility. When she laughed at my story about a customer who insisted I repair a garbage disposal that turned out to be unplugged, I caught myself thinking that maybe, just maybe, we might actually figure this out. One day at a time. Okay, your turn, I said, refilling our wine glasses. Worst job you ever had? Oh, that's easy. Insurance claims adjuster, right after college. I spent 2 years driving around Phoenix looking at car accidents and trying to determine whose fault they were based on skid marks and bent metal. She swirled her wine thoughtfully. Do you know how depressing it is to spend 40 hours a week cataloging other people's worst days? Is that when you decided to become? I realized I still didn't know what she did for work. What do you do? Actually, I know you used to be married to Richard and you host book clubs, but I never asked about your job. I'm a freelance graphic designer. Started doing it part-time when Avery was little. Then went full-time after the divorce. She gestured around the kitchen. This house, the nice appliances, the ability to invite handymen to impromptu dinners. That's all thanks to convincing small businesses that they need better logos and brochures. That's how you can afford coffee that tastes like it cost more than my lunch. Exactly. One overpriced coffee habit. Funded by making sure law offices don't use Comic Sans for their letterhead. She took a sip of wine. What about you? Was handyman work always the plan, or did you have dreams of engineering empire building? God, no. I wanted to build bridges, big, impressive bridges that would last for centuries and have plaques with my name on them. Eddie Rodriguez Bridge, spanning the Colorado River, or something equally ridiculous. What changed? I thought about how to explain it without sounding like a complete failure. I spent 3 years in an office designing parts of buildings I'd never see completed. For companies that treated me like a particularly expensive calculator. Everything was about efficiency and cost reduction and meeting deadlines. Nobody cared if the building was beautiful, or if it would last, or if the people working on it felt any sense of pride in what they were creating. So you quit. So I had what my therapist would probably call a mild existential crisis. In the middle of a Tuesday morning meeting about HVAC optimization, I laughed, but it felt a little hollow. I realized I'd rather spend my life fixing things that were broken than building things that would probably break. And your parents were okay with that. My parents immigrated from Mexico, so their kids could have office jobs and reliable paychecks. Me leaving engineering to become a handyman was, let's say it wasn't their first choice. I picked at the label on the wine bottle, but they've come around. Mostly. My mom still introduces me as Eddie, who used to be an engineer at family gatherings. Ouch, it's fine. She means well, and honestly, she's not wrong to worry. Being a handyman doesn't exactly come with a pension plan or health insurance. That doesn't make you choose between paying rent and going to the doctor. Samantha was quiet for a moment, and I could see her filing away this information under the fundamental differences category we talked about earlier. But you're happy, she asked finally. Most days, yeah. I like working with my hands. I like solving problems that have actual solutions. And I like that when I fix something, it stays fixed. I gestured around her kitchen, like that cabinet door. Tomorrow morning, it's still going to close properly. That's satisfying in a way that designing theoretical office buildings never was. I understand that more than you might think. She stood up and started clearing plates. After the divorce, I thought about going back to a regular job, steady paycheck, benefits, less uncertainty, but freelancing means I get to choose my clients. If someone wants me to design marketing materials for something I don't believe in, I can say no. When Richard was pressuring me to be someone I wasn't, I couldn't say no. At least not for 23 years. What kind of someone did he want you to be? She paused in rinsing dishes. Quieter. More contained. He wanted a wife who would host dinner parties for his colleagues and not express opinions that might make anyone uncomfortable. Someone who would be proud of him and his success without having too much success of her own. That sounds awful. It was. But it was also gradual, you know? It's not like he said, please become a completely different person on our wedding day. It was just little comments here and there. Maybe you shouldn't mention your political opinions at the company party. You really need to take on that big design project when I'm so busy at work. Don't you think it's time to focus more on being a mother? She turned off the water and leaned against the sink. By the time I realized what had happened, I wasn't sure who I was anymore without his approval. The divorce wasn't just losing a marriage. It was having to figure out who Samantha actually was when she wasn't trying to be the person Richard wanted. And what did you figure out? That I like being loud sometimes. I like having strong opinions about books and politics and whether cilantro belongs in guacamole. I like traveling alone and making decisions without consulting anyone else first. She smiled. I like experimental cooking and inviting strangers to dinner and buying expensive coffee just because I can. Cilantro definitely belongs in guacamole. See? We're compatible. We moved to the living room with fresh glasses of wine, and I got my first real look at her space. It was warm and lived in, with mismatched furniture that somehow worked together perfectly. Bookshelves lined to walls, packed with everything from literary fiction to design manuals to what looked like several years' worth of book club selections. A large canvas hung over the fireplace, an abstract painting in blues and greens that felt like looking at water. Did you paint that? I asked, settling onto the couch next to her. I did. Another post-divorce discovery. Turns out I'm not terrible at art when no one's telling me it's a waste of time. It's beautiful. It makes me think of swimming pools and ocean waves at the same time. That's exactly what I was going for. Water that's both contained and wild. She tucked her feet under her. Richard always said art was a nice hobby, but not something to take seriously. After he left, I bought canvases and paint and spent about 6 months making terrible paintings just because I could. How many terrible paintings? Oh, dozens. I have a closet full of artistic disasters, but eventually I started making things. That didn't completely embarrass me. This was the first one I was actually proud of. I studied the painting more carefully. The blues and greens seemed to move and shift depending on how the light hit them. You should do more. Seriously, this is incredible. I set up a little studio in the spare bedroom, nothing fancy. Just an easel and some natural light. It's become my therapy. What do you paint? Whatever I'm feeling, I guess. Anger paintings were very popular right after the divorce, lots of reds and blacks and aggressive brushstrokes. Now I'm in more of a cautiously optimistic blues and greens phase. What would you paint today? She considered this, looking at me over her wine glass. Today I think I'd paint yellow. Bright, unexpected yellow with maybe some warm orange around the edges. The kind of color that surprises you. Yellow's a good color. It is. It's hopeful without being naive, bright without being overwhelming. She curled up against the arm of the couch, facing me. What about you? Any hidden artistic talents I should know about? I can fix things that are broken, and I make an excellent grilled cheese sandwich. That's about the extent of my creative abilities. Everyone has creative abilities. Maybe you just haven't found the right medium yet. Maybe. Though I have to say, watching you cook earlier was pretty artistic. The way you just threw ingredients together without a recipe and somehow made something amazing. That's not art. That's desperation. I was trying to impress you without poisoning you. High stakes cooking. Well, it worked. I'm impressed and not dead, so mission accomplished. She laughed, and I realized I was getting addicted to that sound. Not just the laugh itself, but the way her whole face changed when she was genuinely amused. The way her eyes crinkled at the corners and her shoulders relaxed. Eddie, she said, suddenly more serious. Can I ask you something personal? After everything we've talked about tonight, I think we're well past the personal question threshold. What happened with your last relationship? The one before this, whatever this is. I took a sip of wine, buying time. Her name was Jessica. We dated for about 1.5 years. She was smart, funny, ambitious. On paper, we were perfect for each other. But being with her felt like work. Every conversation was an interview. Every date was a performance. She had this 5-year plan that included engagement timelines and career advancement schedules, and where we'd live and how many kids we'd have. I shook my head. Dating her was like being trapped in someone else's spreadsheet. When did it end? About 6 months ago. She got a job offer in Seattle and asked me to come with her. When I said I wasn't ready to make that kind of decision, she told me I lacked commitment and vision. I paused. She wasn't wrong, exactly. I didn't have a 5-year plan. I still don't. And that was a problem for her. That was everything. For her, she needed to know exactly where we were going and exactly when we'd get there. The idea of just seeing what happened was terrifying to her. Samantha was quiet for a moment. And now I'm sitting in the living room of a woman I met 6 hours ago, drinking wine and talking about art and wondering if maybe not having a plan isn't such a terrible thing after all. Samantha smiled and was about to respond when her phone buzzed. On the coffee table, she glanced at it and her expression changed. Everything okay? I asked. It's my neighbor, Martha. She wants to know if everything's all right because there's a strange truck in my driveway, and she hasn't seen me all evening. Samantha held up the phone. Welcome to suburban life, where everyone knows everyone else's business whether you want them to or not. Should I move my truck? God, no. Martha needs to learn that divorced women are allowed to have visitors. She typed back quickly. There. I told her I'm entertaining a friend and that the truck belongs to the very nice handyman who fixed my cabinet. Very nice? I was being diplomatic. I could have said incredibly charming or surprisingly insightful, but Martha's heart might not have been able to handle it. Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. Samantha looked at me with an expression that clearly said I'm sorry for what's about to happen. That'll be Martha. She has terrible timing and absolutely no boundaries. She got up from the couch. I should probably answer it before she starts peeking through windows. She opened the door to reveal a woman in her mid-60s wearing a bright purple tracksuit, and the kind of determined expression that suggested she wasn't leaving without answers. "Martha," Samantha said with forced cheerfulness. "What brings you by so late?" "Oh, you know how it is. I was just concerned about the unfamiliar vehicle." Martha's eyes immediately found me over Samantha's shoulder. "And who might this be?" "Martha Williams. Meet Eddie Rodriguez." "Eddie. This is my neighbor Martha. She keeps very close tabs on the neighborhood security situation." I stood up and walked over, extending my hand. "Nice to meet you, Mrs. Williams." Martha shook my hand while conducting what felt like a full interrogation via eye contact. "Rodriguez. That's Spanish, isn't it?" "Mexican. Actually, my parents immigrated here in the 80s. HMM. And what brings you to our quiet little neighborhood?" "Cabinet repair," I said honestly. Samantha had a loose hinge. "Just the one hinge?" "That seems like a very small job to warrant staying so late." Samantha stepped in. "Martha, would you like some coffee? I just made a fresh pot." "Oh no, dear, I couldn't. Caffeine keeps me up all night. Though I did notice you to seem to be having quite an animated conversation earlier." I could hear laughter all the way from my kitchen window. The windows were open, Samantha said. "It's a beautiful evening." "Indeed it is." "And Mr. Rodriguez, do you live nearby?" "About 20 minutes away, near downtown Phoenix." "Downtown? How urban." Martha's tone suggested this was roughly equivalent to living in a war zone. "And you fix cabinets for a living?" "Among other things. I'm a general handyman. Cabinets, plumbing, electrical work, whatever needs fixing." "How practical. Though I have to say, Samantha, you usually do your own repairs." "Very independent, our Samantha. Always has been, even when she was married to Richard." I caught Samantha's barely perceptible wince at the mention of her ex-husband. "Well," Martha continued, "I suppose everyone needs help sometimes. Though I was just telling my book club yesterday how unusual it's become for young women to have gentlemen callers these days. Everything's so casual now, so unstructured." "Martha," Samantha said gently, "Eddie and I were just having dinner and conversation. Nothing scandalous, I promise. Oh, I'm not suggesting anything improper. It's just that it's been so long since you've had any male visitors at all. I was beginning to worry you'd sworn off men entirely after what Richard put you through." The silence that followed was loaded with enough awkwardness to power Martha's house for a week. "Well," I said, trying to rescue the situation, "I should probably head home soon anyway." "Early day tomorrow." "Nonsense," Martha said, surprising me. "It's barely 9 o'clock. When I was your age, the evening was just getting started at 9 o'clock. She looked between Samantha and me with what I was beginning to recognize as calculation. "You know, you'd make a very handsome couple, Martha," Samantha warned. "I'm just saying. It's nice to see you laughing again, dear. You've seemed so serious lately. And Mr. Rodriguez seems like a very polite young man. Much better than that awful Marcus character your book club tried to set you up with last month." "There was a Marcus?" I asked, unable to resist. "Divorced accountant with strong opinions about proper lawn maintenance," Samantha said dryly. The date lasted exactly 37 minutes. "He spent 20 of those minutes explaining why my sprinkler system was inefficient," Martha added. "Helpfully, very tedious man. No sense of humor whatsoever." "Unlike some people," Samantha said, glancing at me with a small smile. Martha didn't miss the look. "Oh yes, I can see the appeal. Humor is so important in a relationship. My Harold always said that if you can make a woman laugh, you're halfway to winning her heart." "Your Harold sounds like a wise man," I said. He was indeed. 43 years of marriage before the good Lord called him home. Of course, we met when we were both 22. So we grew up together, you might say. She paused meaningfully. Very different from the modern approach to relationships. I could feel Samantha tense beside me, but Martha wasn't done. Though I suppose age is just a number, isn't it? My niece recently married a man 15 years older than her, and they're perfectly happy. Love finds a way, as they say. "It certainly does," Samantha said carefully. "Well," Martha said, finally seeming to realize she'd overstayed her welcome, "I should let you to get back to your evening. It was lovely meeting you, Eddie. I do hope we'll see more of you around the neighborhood." "Thank you, Mrs. Williams. The pleasure was all mine." After Martha left, Samantha closed the door and leaned against it with a sigh. "I'm so sorry about that. Martha means well, but she has absolutely no filter. She's sweet, a little intense, but sweet. She also just broadcast our entire business to the neighborhood. By tomorrow morning, every house on the street will know I had a handsome young man over for dinner. Is that a problem? Not for me. but small neighborhoods can be gossipy. You might want to prepare yourself for curious looks if you come back. When I come back, I corrected. Not if. She smiled. When you come back. Though after meeting Martha, I feel obligated to warn you that my book club is even more intrusive. And they have wine, which makes them bolder. Your book club knows about me. They will after Martha calls them, which she's probably doing right now. Samantha walked back to the couch. Fair warning, they're going to want to meet you. And by want to meet you, I mean interrogate you about your intentions while pretending to discuss literature. Should I be scared? Terrified? These are women who've survived divorces, raised children, and built careers in a world that didn't always make it easy for them. They can smell insincerity from 3 blocks away. I sat back down beside her. What will you tell them? The truth. That I met someone unexpected who makes me laugh and doesn't seem to mind. That I have opinions about everything. She paused. That I'm figuring it out as I go, and they need to trust me to know what's good for me. Think they'll buy it? Probably not, but they love me enough to let me make my own mistakes. She curled back up against the arm of the couch. What about you? Any friends who are going to have strong opinions about this situation? My brother Justin will probably want details about everything from your coffee to your book collection. And my friend Mark from work will definitely have jokes about age gaps that he'll think are hilarious and I'll pretend to laugh at. But they'll be supportive. In their own way, yeah. They want me to be happy. If you make me happy, they'll figure out how to be okay with whatever this is. And if I don't make you happy, then we'll figure that out too. One day at a time, remember. She smiled and reached for her wine glass. One day at a time. Though after Martha's visit, I think we can safely say the neighborhood knows we're figuring it out together. One day at a time. Though after Martha's visit, I think we can safely say the neighborhood knows we're figuring it out together. The wine had relaxed us both, and the earlier tension about age gaps and future plans had settled into something more comfortable. I found myself studying Samantha's face in the soft lamplight, noticing the way she unconsciously tucked her hair behind her ear when she was thinking. How her eyes got brighter when she was about to say something that amused her. Can I ask you something that might sound stupid? I said. After the evening we've had, I think we're well beyond worrying about stupid questions. When you were married to Richard, did you ever feel like you were living someone else's life? She considered this, swirling the last bit of wine in her glass. Every day for the last 5 years of our marriage. Why? Because sitting here with you, I feel like I'm living my actual life. For the first time in years. Like all the conversations I've had before this were just practice. That's not stupid at all. She paused, looking for the right words. That's how I felt the first time I painted something I actually liked. Like I'd been coloring inside someone else's lines my whole life and suddenly discovered I could draw my own. We were sitting closer now. Close enough that I could smell her perfume mixing with the faint scent of paint that seemed to cling to her hair. Close enough to notice that she had a tiny scar near her left temple. Barely visible unless you were really looking. How did you get that? I asked, reaching up to touch the scar gently. Avery threw a toy truck at me when she was 3. I told her she couldn't have ice cream for breakfast. She didn't move away from my touch. She has excellent aim and strong convictions about dessert. Sounds like she gets that from her mother. The strong convictions or the excellent aim, both. She laughed, and I realized my hand was still touching her face. Neither of us moved to change that. Eddie, she said softly, I should probably tell you something. What? I haven't. I mean, since Richard, I haven't really. She took a breath. I haven't felt this comfortable with someone in a very long time. It's terrifying and wonderful, and I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing. Join the club. I've been winging it since I walked through your front door. We're quite a pair, aren't we? To people who have no idea what they're doing, trying to figure it out together. Could be worse. How? We could be boring. She smiled and leaned into my hand. We're definitely not boring. The space between us seemed to shrink without either of us moving. I could see the flecks of gold in her hazel eyes. Could count the freckles across her nose that her makeup hadn't quite covered. Samantha, I said, my voice rougher than I intended. Yes? I'm going to kiss you now, if that's okay. I was wondering when you were going to get around to that. When our lips met, it felt like coming home and jumping off a cliff at the same time. She tasted like wine and possibilities, and when she made a soft sound in the back of her throat, I thought my heart might actually stop. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative. Both of us testing this new territory. But then her hand found the back of my neck, fingers tangling in my hair, and tentative became something else entirely. Something hungry and real and perfect. When we finally broke apart, We were both breathing hard. Wow, she whispered. Yeah, wow. We stayed close, foreheads touching, sharing the same breath, so, she said eventually. That happened. It did. Any regrets? Not yet. Ask me again tomorrow when I've had time to overthink it. I will. I brushed a strand of hair away from her face. Can I tell you something? What? This is the best cabinet repair job I've ever done. She burst out laughing, the tension breaking. Like a bubble. You realize you're never going to be able to top this, right? Every future repair job is going to be a disappointment. Worth it. She curled up against my side, her head on my shoulder, and we sat like that for a while, listening to the quiet sounds of the neighborhood settling into evening. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked, a car drove by, headlights sweeping across the living room wall. Eddie, she said eventually. What are you thinking about? Honestly, I'm thinking about how I'm going to explain to Justin why I was gone all evening when I was supposed to be home by 4. What will you tell him? The truth. That I met someone extraordinary and lost track of time. Am I extraordinary? I looked down at her. This woman who had turned a routine Tuesday into something I'd remember forever. You really have to ask? I like hearing it. You're extraordinary, Samantha Patterson. You're smart and funny and brave enough to start over at 51. You're kind enough to invite strange handymen to dinner and wise enough to call me on my nonsense. You paint beautiful things and make terrible book club jokes, and you kissed me like you meant it. I did mean it. Good. Because I meant it to. She was quiet for a moment, tracing patterns on my chest with her finger. You know, when I was married to Richard, I used to have this recurring dream. I'd be standing in an empty house, and I could hear voices and laughter coming from outside. But I couldn't find the door to get out. I couldn't figure out how to get to where the life was actually happening. You still have that dream, not since the divorce. But tonight, she paused. Tonight I feel like I not only found the door, but someone opened it for me. I'm pretty sure you opened it yourself. I just happened to be standing on the other side. She lifted her head to look at me. See, this is what I mean. You say things like that, and I start thinking, maybe 48 and 32 aren't such impossible numbers after all. 51 and 32. I corrected. Right, 51 and 32. Though I have to warn you, Avery's going to point out that I'm old enough to be your mother if I've been a very irresponsible teenager. Are you trying to talk yourself out of this? Maybe a little. It's what I do when something feels too good to be true. And does this feel too good to be true? She studied my face for a long moment. Honestly, yes. Which either means I should run screaming in the opposite direction, or I should hold on tight and see where it goes. What's your gut telling you? My gut is telling me that for the first time in 5 years, I don't want to be alone tonight. She paused. But my brain is telling me that's exactly the kind of thinking that leads to mourning after regrets and awkward explanations to teenage daughters. Listen to whichever one feels more like you. She was quiet for so long I thought she might have fallen asleep. Then she said, can I ask you to do something that might sound crazy at this point? I'm pretty sure I'd say yes to anything. Will you stay tonight? Not 4. I mean, we don't have to. I just don't want this day to end yet. I want to fall asleep knowing that when I wake up, this will all still be real. I kissed the top of her head. I'd like that too. The guest room has clean sheets and Samantha. Yes, I'd rather stay with you. If you're comfortable with that. We don't have to do anything except sleep. I just want to be close to you. She looked up at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. You know, most men your age would have already tried to get me into bed. I'm not most men my age. No, she said softly. You're not. And that's exactly why this is so terrifying. The next morning arrived with the kind of bright Arizona sunshine that makes everything feel possible. I woke up slowly, aware of warmth beside me and the unfamiliar scent of Samantha's sheets. We'd fallen asleep talking, her head on my chest, my arm around her shoulders. Nothing had happened beyond holding each other, but it felt more intimate than anything I'd experienced with anyone else. I was trying to slip out of bed without waking her, when her phone started buzzing insistently on the nightstand. She murmured, reaching for it without opening her eyes. Hello. Her voice changed instantly. Avery, what's wrong? You're supposed to be at your father's until... She sat up abruptly, suddenly wide awake. What do you mean you're outside? I could hear a teenage voice through the phone, high-pitched and agitated. Okay. Give me 5 minutes. Samantha hung up, then turned to me with panic in her eyes. Avery's here. Now she had a fight with her father and drove over. She's sitting in my driveway. Shit. Yeah. Shit. She was already out of bed, grabbing clothes from her dresser. Eddie, I'm so sorry. But you need to. I know. I'll get out of here. No, wait, she paused, holding a sweater against her chest. Actually, maybe you shouldn't run. If she sees you sneaking out the back door, it'll look worse than if you're just here. You want me to meet your teenage daughter while wearing yesterday's clothes and having obviously spent the night. I want you to meet my teenage daughter before she decides you're a creep who's taking advantage of her vulnerable mother. Samantha pulled the sweater over her head. Trust me, Avery's imagination is worse than reality. Usually, before I could respond, we heard a car door slam, followed by the front door opening. Mom, a voice called from downstairs. Mom, are you awake? I need to talk to you about Dad and his stupid girlfriend, and they're stupid. The voice stopped abruptly. Samantha and I looked at each other. She saw your truck. Samantha whispered, Mom. The voice was louder now, with an edge that suggested 17 years of opinions were about to be unleashed. Coming, sweetheart, Samantha called back. She turned to me. Just be yourself. She's protective, but she's not unreasonable. What do I say? The truth. That you fixed my cabinet, and we had dinner, and you're a decent human being who isn't trying to steal my jewelry or convert me to a cult. That's a low bar. You'd be surprised how many men fail to clear it. We walked downstairs together, and I got my first look at Avery Patterson. She was tall like her mother, with long dark hair and the kind of sharp intelligence in her eyes that suggested she missed very little. She was standing in the living room holding an overnight bag, and her expression went through several rapid changes when she saw me: surprise, calculation, and what might have been mild horror. Avery, Samantha said calmly, this is Eddie Rodriguez. Eddie, my daughter Avery. Hi, I said, trying to strike the right balance between friendly and respectful. Nice to meet you. Avery looked between us, taking in our clothes from yesterday. The wine glass is still on the coffee table, the general evidence of an evening that had extended well into the night. Did you spend the night here? She asked me directly. Avery, Samantha warned. It's okay, I told Samantha, then turned back to Avery. Yes, I did, but not the way you're probably thinking. Your mom and I had dinner and talked until late, and she asked me to stay because it felt safer than driving home tired. In the guest room. The silence stretched long enough to become awkward. No, Samantha said finally. Not in the guest room. Avery's eyes widened. Mom, seriously what? I'm a grown woman, Avery. I'm allowed to have guests who are clearly younger than you and who you've obviously just met. Avery dropped her bag and crossed her arms. Mom, please tell me you didn't pick up some random guy. I didn't pick up anyone, Samantha said, her voice getting sharp. Eddie came here to fix my cabinet door. We had dinner, we talked, and I enjoyed his company. That's allowed. How much younger? Avery asked me. Avery, Samantha protested. I'm 32, I said. Avery did the math quickly. Jesus, Mom, 32. Really? Language. Samantha said automatically. Are you kidding me right now? You're worried about my language when you're having sleepovers with someone who's barely older than me. I'm 15 years older than you, I pointed out. 14 and a half. Avery corrected. My birthday is in March. The point stands, does it though? Because I'm pretty sure when I was learning to drive, you were still in college. That stung because it was probably true. Look, Avery, I understand this is weird for you where doesn't begin to cover it. This is my mom we're talking about. She reads books about gardening for fun and goes to bed at 10:30. She doesn't do. She gestured vaguely at both of us. This. Maybe you don't know everything about what your mom does, I said gently. I know she's been through enough. Without some guy taking advantage of her midlife crisis. Excuse me, Samantha's voice could have cut glass. Did you just call me a midlife crisis? Avery realized she'd stepped over a line. Mom, I didn't mean you absolutely meant it. You think because I'm 51 and divorced, any man who shows interest in me must be either desperate or predatory. That's not what I said. It's what you implied. And for your information, Eddie didn't take advantage of anything. If anyone did the pursuing, it was me. Avery looked genuinely shocked. You pursued him? I invited him to dinner. I asked him to stay. I made all the decisions about what I wanted and when I wanted. If Samantha moved closer to her daughter, I know you want to protect me, and I love you for that. But I don't need protecting from my own choices. But Mom, he's so young. What do you even have in common? More than you might think, I said. We both like good coffee and terrible book club discussions. We both changed careers to do something that makes us happy instead of something that looks good on paper. We both think your mom is pretty incredible. You've known her for like 12 hours. Sometimes 12 hours is enough to recognize something real. Avery studied my face like she was trying to solve a complex equation. And what happens when you get bored? When you realize dating someone your parents' age is more complicated than you thought. Then I'll deal with that when it happens. But I'm not planning on getting bored. Everyone says that. Fair enough. But not everyone means it. Samantha had been watching this exchange with the careful attention of someone trying to decide whether to intervene. Avery, what happened with your father? Avery's combative stance deflated. Slightly. He wants me to spend more time with Karen. Like family dinner time. She keeps trying to bond with me over shopping and reality TV shows. And when I told Dad I wasn't interested, he said I was being difficult and needed to make more of an effort. That's frustrating, Samantha said. And then when I said I wanted to come here early, he said I was running away from my problems and using you as an escape. Avery's voice cracked slightly. He made it sound like choosing to be here was somehow wrong. I could see the hurt in her eyes, and suddenly her hostility toward me made more sense. Her safe space was being invaded on the same day her other safe space had become complicated. I should go, I said quietly to Samantha. Let you to talk. No. Avery said suddenly. I mean, you're already here. And Mom seems. She looked at her mother's face. You seem happy. Happier than I've seen you in a while. I am happy, Samantha said softly. Then I guess I need to figure out how to be okay. With that, Avery picked up her bag. But I have conditions. Such as? I asked. If you hurt her, I will make your life very unpleasant. I'm 17, which means I have energy time. And absolutely no patience for grown men who don't keep their promises. That's fair. And I want to know what your intentions are. Like, actually. Not some vague we're taking it one day at a time nonsense. I looked at Samantha, then back at Avery. My intention is to get to know your mom better. To see if what started yesterday can turn into something real and lasting. And to treat her with the respect and care she deserves every step of the way. Avery considered this. Okay, that's actually a pretty good answer. Thanks. But I'm still going to be watching you. I wouldn't expect anything less. 3 days later, I was back at Samantha's house. Ostensibly to check on the cabinet door, but really because I couldn't stay away. We'd been texting constantly since that morning with Avery, casual messages. That gradually became more personal, more necessary. She sent me pictures of her paintings in progress. I sent her photos of particularly ridiculous repair jobs. Neither of us acknowledged how quickly this had become the best part of our days. The door's holding up perfectly, I announced, closing and opening it several times for effect. Such dedication to customer service, Samantha said, leaning against the kitchen island. Though I should probably warn you, Avery's coming over later, and she's bringing backup. Backup? My book club. Emergency meeting. Apparently, Martha called everyone after she accidentally mentioned your existence. During her weekly grocery store reconnaissance mission, I set down my tools. Should I be worried? Terrified. These women have collectively survived 7 divorces, raised 12 children, and built successful careers in a time when that wasn't easy. They're going to ask you questions that would make a job interviewer blush. Samantha had been watching this exchange with the careful attention of someone trying to decide whether to intervene. Avery, what happened with your father? Avery's combative stance deflated. Slightly. He wants me to spend more time with Karen. Like family dinner time. She keeps trying to bond with me over shopping and reality TV shows. And when I told Dad I wasn't interested, he said I was being difficult and needed to make more of an effort. That's frustrating, Samantha said. And then when I said I wanted to come here early, he said I was running away from my problems and using you as an escape. Avery's voice cracked slightly. He made it sound like choosing to be here was somehow wrong. I could see the hurt in her eyes, and suddenly her hostility toward me made more sense. Her safe space was being invaded on the same day her other safe space had become complicated. I should go, I said quietly to Samantha. Let you to talk. No. Avery said suddenly. I mean, you're already here. And Mom seems. She looked at her mother's face. You seem happy. Happier than I've seen you in a while. I am happy, Samantha said softly. Then I guess I need to figure out how to be okay. With that, Avery picked up her bag. But I have conditions. Such as? I asked. If you hurt her, I will make your life very unpleasant. I'm 17, which means I have energy time. And absolutely no patience for grown men who don't keep their promises. That's fair. And I want to know what your intentions are. Like, actually. Not some vague we're taking it one day at a time nonsense. I looked at Samantha. An elegant woman with silver hair and sharp eyes stepped forward. Jonna Morrison, she said, extending a hand with the firmness of someone accustomed to boardroom negotiations. I understand you're the reason Samantha's been humming while she paints. I hope that's a good thing. Remains to be seen. A shorter woman with curly red hair and laugh lines around her eyes nudged Jonna aside. Don't mind her. She's suspicious of everyone under 60. I'm Carol, and I think it's wonderful that Samantha's finally having some fun. Some fun. The third woman, tall and athletic with graying blonde hair, raised an eyebrow. Carol. They've known each other less than a week, so. How long did it take you to know you wanted to marry Jim? That's different. Jim and I were the same age. Ladies, Martha interrupted. Perhaps we should let the young man sit down before we begin the Spanish Inquisition. No one expects the Spanish Inquisition, I said automatically. The room went quiet for a moment. Then Carol burst out laughing. Oh, I like him already. Monty Python reference. Jonna noted approvingly. Shows education and humor. Points in his favor. This isn't a scoring system, Samantha protested. Everything's a scoring system, dear. Martha said, settling into her favorite chair. The question is whether Eddie knows the rules of the game. Avery arrived 20 minutes into what could only be described as the most polite interrogation of my life. By then, they'd established my employment history, family background, relationship status, political leanings, and opinion on whether pineapple belonged on pizza. It doesn't, which apparently earned me significant points with Jonna. How's it going? Avery asked, dropping her backpack by the door. Your boyfriend is holding up remarkably well, Carol announced. He's not my boyfriend, Samantha said quickly. We're figuring things out. At your age, dear, figuring things out is a luxury you can't afford, Jonna said matter-of-factly. Either he's worth the complications or he isn't. And what's your assessment? I asked. Genuinely curious. Jonna studied me for a long moment. You fix things for a living. You make Samantha laugh, and you haven't run away despite 20 minutes of intensive questioning. Those are all encouraging signs. But I could hear there was a but coming. But you're 32 years old with a small business and no long-term financial plan. Dating a 51-year-old woman with a teenage daughter and a mortgage. The practical considerations are significant, Jonna, Samantha warned. I'm being realistic, not mean. Love is wonderful, but it doesn't pay property taxes or college tuition. Actually, Avery said quietly, I have a full scholarship to ASU. So college tuition isn't Mom's problem anymore. Everyone turned to look at her. This was apparently news to the book club. When did that happen? Samantha asked. Yesterday. I was going to tell you tonight. Avery looked slightly embarrassed. Academic scholarship, full ride. The room erupted in congratulations, and I watched Samantha's face transform with pride and relief. In that moment, I understood something fundamental about their relationship. They were a team, figuring out life together one challenge at a time. Well, Jonna said finally, that does change the financial equation somewhat. It changes a lot of things, Samantha said, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Indeed it does, Martha agreed. Though I still think Eddie needs to meet Richard before anyone makes any major decisions. Absolutely not, Samantha said firmly. Richard has no say in my personal life anymore. But he has a say in Avery's life, Jonna pointed out. And if you're serious about this young man, he'll be part of Avery's life too. The weight of that settled over the room like a blanket. This wasn't just about Samantha and me anymore. It was about family dynamics, shared custody arrangements, and the complicated mathematics of blended relationships. One step at a time, I said finally, right now. I'm just trying to prove I'm worth the book club's approval. Smart answer, Carol said. And you're getting there. 2 weeks later, everything changed with a single phone call. I was at Samantha's house, helping her hang a new painting in her studio when her phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID, and her face went pale. It's Richard, she said, looking at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Pure dread. You don't have to answer. Yes, I do. He only calls about Avery, and she's been so happy about the scholarship. She swiped to accept the call. Hello, Richard. I couldn't hear his side of the conversation, but I could see Samantha's body language shifting with each passing second. Her shoulders tensed, her free hand clenched into a fist, and her voice took on the careful, measured tone I recognized from our first night together when she was trying to stay in control. I see, she said. And when did you decide this? Silence. No, Richard. You can't just unilaterally change our custody arrangement. Because you don't approve of my personal life. My stomach dropped. This was about me. That's none of your business. No, you haven't met him, and frankly, you don't need to. What do you mean concerns about her environment? Samantha caught my eye and shook her head slightly, a warning not to react. But I could feel anger building in my chest. This man who had left her, who had made her question her own worth, was now trying to use their daughter as a weapon. Richard. Avery is 17 years old and perfectly capable of making her own decisions about where she wants to spend her time. Yes, I heard you. You want her to stay with you until I sort out my situation. As if my life is something that needs sorting. She was pacing now, her voice getting sharper despite her obvious efforts to stay calm. You know what? Let me ask you something. When you started dating Karen while we were still married, did I try to change Avery's custody arrangement? Did I suggest that your choices were creating an inappropriate environment for our daughter? Richard's response must have been particularly infuriating, because Samantha stopped pacing entirely. Don't you dare, she said, her voice deadly quiet. Don't you dare suggest that I'm having some kind of breakdown. I am happier and more stable than I've been in years, and if you can't handle that, it's your problem, not mine. She listened for another moment, then hung up without saying goodbye. What did he say? I asked. He wants to renegotiate our custody agreement. He thinks Avery's spending time here while I'm going through this phase isn't in her best interests. Samantha sat down heavily on her paint-splattered stool. He's threatening to take me to court if I don't agree to reduce my time with her. Can he do that? He can try. Our original agreement gives us joint custody, but if he can convince a judge that my living situation has become unstable. She trailed off, staring at her hands. Samantha, look at me. I knelt down beside her chair. Your living situation isn't unstable. You're a successful businesswoman with a beautiful home and a dog. Who adores you. The fact that you're dating someone doesn't change any of that. Someone 19 years younger than me, she said quietly. Someone I've known for 2 weeks. Someone who spends the night here regularly. She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. Richard's not stupid, Eddie. He knows exactly how this will look to a family court judge, so we get ahead of it. We show them who I really am, not whatever story Richard's going to tell. She shook her head. Eddie, there's no we in this. This is my problem, my daughter, my mess to clean up. Like hell it is. Richard is using me as ammunition against you. That makes it my problem too. No, it doesn't. She stood up abruptly, moving away from me. This is exactly what I was afraid of. This is why I should have listened to my instincts and kept things simple, safe, uncomplicated, age-appropriate. She was spiraling. I could see it happening. God, what was I thinking? That I could just ignore reality and play. House was someone who's barely out of college. I graduated college 10 years ago. You know what I mean. She turned to face me, and I could see the walls going back up in real time. This isn't fair to you, Eddie. You shouldn't have to deal with custody battles and ex-husbands and complicated family dynamics. You should be with someone who can just be with you without all this baggage. Stop, I said firmly. Stop deciding what I can and can't handle. I'm being realistic. You're being scared. And I get it, I do. But you're also doing exactly what Richard wants you to do. You're letting him make you doubt yourself, doubt us. Doubt everything good that's happened between us. Maybe he's right, though. Maybe this is just a midlife crisis. Maybe I'm being selfish, putting my own happiness ahead of Avery's stability. Samantha, your happiness is Avery's stability. She told me herself that you seem lighter, more yourself, than you've been in years. That matters. Not if it cost me my daughter. The words hung in the air between us like a challenge. I could see the calculation happening behind her eyes. The terrible math of love versus loss, risk versus safety. What are you saying? I asked quietly. I'm saying maybe we should take a break. Until this gets resolved. Until I figure out how to handle Richard without dragging you into it. A break. Just some space. Some time to think clearly without emotions clouding everything. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Is that what you want? I want to protect my daughter. I want to protect you. And I want to protect what we have before Richard destroys it completely. What if taking a break destroys it instead? She didn't answer, which was an answer in itself, okay. I said finally, if that's what you need. Eddie, no, I get it. I do. You're in an impossible situation, and I'm making it worse just by existing. I picked up my tools from where I'd set them down, but for what it's worth, I think you're stronger than you're giving yourself credit for. And I think Richard knows it too. That's why he's trying so hard to make you doubt yourself. I headed toward the door, then stopped. When you're ready to fight for us instead of against us, you know where to find me. I left her standing in her studio, surrounded by paintings of hope and possibility, looking like she was drowning in her own fear. For 3 days, I threw myself into work. I fixed Mrs. Henderson's leaky faucet with unnecessary precision, replaced Mr. Garcia's broken outlet covers like I was performing surgery, and cleaned my tools until they gleamed. Justin watched me with the careful attention of someone observing a wounded animal. You know, he said on the 3rd day, "You could just call her. She asked for space. I'm giving her space. She asked for space because she's scared. That doesn't mean you have to disappear forever." I was about to explain why he was wrong when my phone rang. Unknown number. Eddie Rodriguez, Fix-It Solutions. "Mr. Rodriguez, this is Richard Patterson. I think we need to talk." Every muscle in my body tensed. "About what?" "About your relationship with my ex-wife and how it's affecting my daughter." "I don't think we have anything to discuss, Mr. Patterson." "Oh, but we do. You see, I've done some research on you. Small business owner, no significant assets, history of job instability. Not exactly what I'd call an ideal influence on a teenage girl. My relationship with Avery, your relationship with Avery, is exactly the problem. She's at an impressionable age, and seeing her mother make questionable choices about men sends the wrong message about relationship. P.S. and stability." I took a deep breath, fighting the urge to hang up. "What do you want?" "I want you to end things with Samantha. Cleanly, completely. She's confused right now. Obviously going through some kind of delayed rebellion, but she'll come to her senses eventually. If you care about her at all, you'll make this easier for everyone. And if I don't, then I'll make sure the family court judge understands exactly what kind of environment Avery is being exposed to. A mother who brings home men young enough to be her son, who prioritizes her own midlife crisis over her daughter's stability. It won't look good." The line went quiet except for the sound of my own heartbeat in my ears. "You know what's interesting, Mr. Patterson?" I said finally. "I've spent 3 days thinking Samantha was right to be afraid of you. But listening to you now, I realize she's not afraid of what you might do. She's afraid of who she used to be when she was with you. Excuse me, she's afraid of being that person again. The one who let you make her smaller. Who believed your version of who she should be instead of trusting her own judgment." I was pacing now, the anger giving me clarity. "But here's the thing you don't understand. She's not that person anymore. And she's not going to let you make those decisions for her again. You're delusional if you think." "I'm not finished." My voice was steady now, calm. "Samantha is one of the strongest, smartest, most capable people I've ever met. She's raised an incredible daughter, built a successful business, and created a life she actually wants to live. If you can't see that, if all you can see is what's wrong with her choices, then you're the one who's confused. Mr. Rodriguez, I'm still not finished. You want to take this to court? Go ahead. But when you do, make sure you explain to the judge why a 17-year-old girl with a full scholarship, a mother who loves her, and a stable home environment somehow constitutes an unsafe situation. Make sure you explain why your discomfort with your ex-wife's dating life is more important than your daughter's happiness." Richard was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had lost some of its confident edge. "You don't understand the complexities. I understand that Avery loves her mother. I understand that she's thriving. And I understand that you're using her as a weapon because you can't stand that. Samantha is happy without you." I hung up before he could respond. 30 minutes later, I was standing on Samantha's front porch, holding a bag of coffee beans from the expensive place she liked and trying to figure out what to say. Before I could knock, the door opened. "I heard your truck," she said quietly. She looked tired, like she hadn't been sleeping. "I brought coffee, a peace offering, Eddie," Richard called me. Her face went pale. "What did he say?" "He tried to convince me to break up with you for your own good. Told me I was bad for Avery, bad for your stability, bad for your reputation." I stepped closer. "He also made it very clear that this isn't really about protecting anyone, it's about control. I know what it's about. That's why I asked for space. To protect you from what? From a bully who's threatened by his ex-wife's happiness." I shook my head. "Samantha, the only way Richard wins is if we let him. If we make decisions based on his fear instead of our own truth. But if he takes this to court, then we fight him, together, with the truth." I reached for her hands. "The truth is that you're an amazing mother. The truth is that Avery is happy and healthy and proud of who you've become. The truth is that what we have is real and worth protecting. Eddie, you don't understand. If I lose her, you won't, because Richard's bluffing. He knows as well as anyone that Avery would choose you. He knows that any objective observer would see exactly what I see, a mother who's finally living authentically, and a daughter who's benefiting from that example. Tears were streaming down her face now. But what if you're wrong? What if I'm risking everything for something that might not even last? Then we'll face that when it happens. But Samantha, look at me. I waited until she met my eyes. What if you're not risking everything? What if you're fighting for it? She was quiet for a long moment, and I could see the war happening behind her eyes. Fear versus hope. Safety versus possibility. I'm scared, she whispered. I know. I'm scared too. But I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you. She looked down at our joined hands, then back up at my face. Richard's not going to make this easy. Then we'll make it hard for him. Instead, for the first time in 3 days, she smiled. If you want, if you're ready to stop running from this and start running toward it. She pulled me into her house and into her arms. I'm ready. 6 months later, I was standing in the same kitchen where it all started, watching Samantha teach Avery how to make her experimental chicken dish. They moved around each other with the easy rhythm of two people who had found their footing again, laughing when Avery accidentally added too much paprika, and debating whether cilantro really belonged in everything. Eddie, Avery called over. Settle an argument. Is Mom's cooking actually good? Or have you just been pretending this whole time? Your mom's cooking is incredible, I said honestly, though I might be biased. Definitely biased. Samantha agreed, bumping my shoulder with hers as she passed. The custody battle with Richard had lasted 3 months and ended exactly as I'd predicted, with him backing down when he realized Avery would testify on her mother's behalf. The judge, a practical woman in her 60s, had been more interested in Avery's happiness and stability than in Richard's concerns about age gaps. When Richard's lawyer tried to paint me as some kind of predatory influence, Avery had asked to speak directly to the judge. Your Honor, she'd said with the confidence that came from being 17 and absolutely certain of her own mind. My mom is the happiest and most stable she's been since the divorce. Eddie treats her with respect, makes her laugh, and has never once tried to replace my father or tell me what to do. If my dad can't see that my mom deserves to be happy, that's his problem, not ours. Case closed. Now we were here, in this kitchen that had become the center of something I never expected to find. Not just love, but family. Not just romance, but real partnership. Samantha and I had learned to navigate her art shows and my business, emergencies, book club meetings, and Avery's college preparations. We'd figured out how to blend our different rhythms without losing what made each of us who we were. So, Avery said, pulling something from her backpack, I have an announcement. Samantha and I looked at each other. Avery's announcements were rarely simple. I got my dorm assignment for ASU, and my roommate seems cool. Which means, she grinned, you can officially stop pretending you don't want to move in together. Samantha blushed. Avery, Mom, his truck is here more than it's at his apartment. His tools live in the garage. He knows where you keep the good coffee. Avery crossed her arms. Just make it official already. I looked at Samantha, seeing the same thought reflected in her eyes. We'd been dancing around this conversation for weeks, both of us afraid to be the first to suggest something so permanent. What do you think? I asked her quietly. I think, she said, reaching for my hand, that cabinet door isn't going to need any more repairs. Probably not. And I think you were right about something you said that first night. What's that? Sometimes the best things happen when you say exactly the wrong thing to exactly the right person. I kissed her then, right there in the kitchen where it all started, while Avery made gagging noises and the timer went off on the experimental chicken. It tasted perfect. Later that evening, as we cleaned up dinner and planned Avery's send-off to college, I caught myself thinking about time and timing, about the difference between a moment and a lifetime. I'd walked into this house to fix a broken cabinet door, and somehow ended up fixing something in myself I hadn't even known was broken. Hey, Samantha said, catching me in my reverie. What are you thinking about? Just this, us? How sometimes the simplest jobs turn out to be the most complicated. And how sometimes, she said, moving closer, the most complicated things turn out to be beautifully simple. We stood there in her kitchen, our kitchen, listening to Avery practice her valedictorian speech upstairs, and I realized I'd never felt more at home anywhere in my life. So, Samantha said eventually, ready to make this official. I've been ready since the day I joked about marrying you. Even though I'm 51. Especially because you're 51. She laughed, that same bright, unfiltered laugh that had started everything. Then I guess we should probably make some plans. One day at a time. One day at a time, she agreed, starting with tomorrow. And just like that, our story became something bigger than either of us had expected. Not an ending, but a beginning. Not a cabinet repair job, but a life rebuilt from the ground up, one day, one choice, one laugh at a time. Up next, you've got some more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.